Hi. I want to speak today about something potentially very explosive, tentatively titled the Phoenicians' contribution to the English language. Um, the genius of the English language, I think, as a guest, speaking myself as a guest to the English language, is its malleability and its openness to other languages and to other peoples speaking it and distorting it, if you will. It's an unpretentious language. It's easy to learn. It sounds great in song, like the Beatles. Uh, it is athletic, unaffected, easily recognizable and adoptable, and in that sense, it's a genius language, and it's difficult for me to say that about English because that's exactly how I feel about French, a language whose literature and history I'm very um, invested in. Um, but English is genius also in its own way, and that's perhaps why it is our time's global language, the lingua franca par excellence, if you will, the language of business, but also art and eloquence and politics and pop culture and the Beatles, you name it. And I mentioned the Beatles is because that's how I learned English, basically by learning Beatles songs. Um, so, so it is genius. It is a language of success wherever you happen to be. And if you don't know English, good luck in life. And just as English is malleable and receptive to all kinds of foreigners and foreignisms, um, linguist John McWhorter argues that it's always been that way in terms of its vocabulary, but it's likewise receptive even so English, it is not has no compunctions about taking in new words, new expressions, foreignisms, if you will. But linguist John McWhorter argues that its grammar has also likewise um, been receptive to changes and distortions, if you will, to a point where there's no such thing as good versus bad grammar in English. And McWhorter argues that people lapse into dichotomizing proper grammar versus bad grammar out of ignorance and laziness. There's no such thing in English. Um, English is the child of Proto-Germanic, itself a descendant of Proto-Indo-European. Um, but McWhorter posits that Proto-Germanic was a distinctly weird offshoot of Proto-Indo-European. This is an exact quote from him. What he means by that is that Proto-Indo-European words beginning with the sounds P, T, and K become F, Th, and H in Proto-Germanic. Thus, the Latin pater for father becomes father. Tres for three becomes three. Canis for dog becomes hound in English. And to the question, why did the Germanic branch of Indo-European go through this sort of sound transformation while the Latin and other branches of Indo-European did not? McWhorter suggests this was no accident. And he argues that because, and any of you who is a learner of a new language will be able to attest to that. Foreign speakers or learners of a new language typically flavor it with their own accents and apply it to their own sound systems. And that's a probable explanation as to why the p, t, and k sounds were distorted so abruptly in Germanic, becoming f, th, and h, um, whereas you don't see these sorts of transformations in other Indo-European languages like Slavic and Greek and Celtic and so forth. Why is that? And who are those intruders who learned Proto-Germanic, if you will, and transformed it? Who were those outsiders with these sounds, the p and th and h, who spoke Germanic languages as a second language and flavored it with their own sound systems and actually grammatical quirks as well. And what was the spoken language of those foreigners who had adopted Germanic? And here's where it becomes explosive. The f, th, and h sounds in Germanic have something in common. They're what McWhorter calls hissy sounds, what linguists refer to as fricatives. And those are very common in the Semitic family of languages and have a very poor presence in Proto-Indo-European languages. Hypothetically, and I stress hypothetically, McWhorter notes that if speakers of languages like Syriac, Aramaic, Hebrew, or Phoenician, languages that are replete with these sounds, the z and ts and h and th and p sounds, if they wrapped their tongues around Proto-Germanic, we might expect that their rendition of Proto-Germanic would have acquired more of those, what he calls hissy sounds, than other Indo-European languages. And so it gets even more interesting because we're still talking about phonology here, but he makes the argument that the grammar also of Proto-Germanic and its descendants, namely English, have verbal conjugations that are rare or do not exist in other Indo-European languages, but that are prevalent in Semitic languages. For instance, the example that he gives, the changes in the verb to see and saw in the past, or in the past, or drink, drank in the past, come, came. Those are normal to those who speak English and German for that matter. But it's not a normal feature in non-Germanic Indo-European languages. And the reason for that, McWhorter hypothesizes, is, quote, Semitic languages, which form their past tenses by changing the vowels inside the verb, might have migrated into Proto-Germanic. Thus, in Hebrew today, and this is still him writing, he writes, the verb he writes is hu kotev, but he wrote is hu katav, and not hu kotevd with the English ed, so that the consonants stay the same while the vowels change. All Semitic languages have this feature. Ancient Semitic languages and modern Semitic languages. Those of you who know Arabic will see, yaktub, katab. So the consonants stay the same and the vowels change in the conjugation. While he explains this, McWhorter, he ends his explanation with and the reason he ends with this exclamation is because the plot thickens. The fact that all Indo-European languages have a future tense, this is another moment. Proto-Germanic languages do not have a future tense. And this is a feature of Semitic languages. Those of you who know Arabic will know that the future is essentially the present with a prefix. It is likewise in English. And here's the rub. Another clue also that he notes is orphan words in Proto-Germanic. That is to say, words that do not have cognates in any other Indo-European language. And those orphan words that exist in English and the ancestor of English, Proto-Germanic, those are orphan words that, wait for it, often dealing with issues of sailing, boating, sea life, and fish. Here's where it gets even more tantalizing. The Phoenician chief deity was Baal. The old High German gods were Fol and Balder, and the Phoenicians had this bad habit of referring to Baal as Baal Adir, that is to say, the great God in modern languages, or Dieu tout-puissant in French, or omnipotent God, or in Arabic, Azza wa Jal, these sort of aggrandizing adjectives added to God. Could this Phoenician Baal Adir, the great God, or God the Great, could it have an echo in the old German god Balder or Baladir, Baal Adir? And to this, you add the hypotheses of a renegade German archaeologist who noted that it would be almost incomprehensible if the Phoenicians had excluded Germania from their world of references, from their frame of references. And that is because they sailed all over the world, and why would they not have sailed to the North Sea? This archaeologist, again a renegade archaeologist, his name is Theo Veneman, he hypothesizes that the Phoenicians not only settled in Northern Europe, but also reshaped Proto-Germanic, the Proto-Germanic language. Well, McWhorter brings the Phoenicians into the mix. He does so, I think, to the chagrin of those Lebanese specifically who disdain Lebanon's Phoenician history and the Lebanese people's Phoenician filiation. And once more, lest it still elude the stunted minds of some, the Phoenicians fertilize Lebanese history and roam its demographic and geological landscape to the same extent that the Seine meanders through Paris and seeds French history. End of story. I mean, it is an incontrovertible historical fact that the Phoenicians came from Lebanon. End of story. And again, McWhorter's idea that the Phoenicians might have also fertilized and transformed Proto-Germanic is still a hypothesis. But he suggests that speakers of Semitic languages, or a Semitic language from way back in history, way down the eastern Mediterranean around the first millennium BC, at a time where Proto-Germanic was thought to have been spoken somewhere in northern Europe. So he hypothesizes that a Semitic people, most probably the most skilled mariners of the ancient world, the Phoenicians, made it to the northern shores of Europe, what is now Denmark and the northern tip of Germany, or the southern tip of Sweden and Norway. They settled there. They learned to speak Proto-Germanic, as many Lebanese throughout history learn other people's languages, namely Arabic. They learned it and transmitted that language to their descendants, flavored with their own phonological and syntactic and lexical habits. Phoenicians were smitten by the sea. They were possessed of an insatiable desire to sail, to travel, to colonize. They held all the ancient world's sea routes. So it is not beyond the pale that they might have also sailed to Northern Europe. And here's how McWhorter concludes this segment of his history of the English language. He writes, they sailed, and they did so with great diligence on both the northern and southern shores of the Mediterranean, taking advantage of their advanced sailing technology, founding major colonies in North Africa and Spain. They even rounded the bend northward up into Portugal a little bit. Did they sail up the British Isles and round past to the Netherlands to hit the neck of land shared today by Denmark and Germany? There's no record that they did so. Apparently, they were very secretive, and we know that about them. They were very secretive about their ship routes and about the construction of their ships. Also, and this is still McWhorter, many of the northern European coastal regions they would have occupied have since sunk under the sea. This leaves us having to make nimble surmises, end quote. And here are some of McWhorter's conjectures that I'll conclude with. The timing was right, he says. By the 7th century BC, the Phoenicians had reached Portugal. By 200 BC, they were vanquished by Rome. Their most splendid Outremer, Carthage, was destroyed and burned to the ground. This means, according to McWhorter, should they have reached Northern Europe, it will have been in the middle of the first millennium BC, when we know Proto-Germanic was spoken. Let me stop here and let this macerate a little bit and see how many angry voices it's going to incite. Cheers.